That's that. That.
Here's mic number one. Mic one. Here's mic two. Mic two. Here's mic number three. Three. Here's mic four. That's four. Here's number five. Mic five.
The current draft city plan didn't include. It had a different.
Mic number six. Mic six.
And the codes are prescribed under the methodology that we were not following. Shall mark land growth area in. The big shade of. Yeah. Okay. You tell me that's what you want. There you go.
Mic seven.
Looking for the city plan meeting?
Oh,
Yeah, hi, welcome, come on in.
Our shoes?
No.
Oh.
If they have other things going on. Taekwondo class.
Oh,
Louise is actually over there.
that sounds like fun. How you doing?
Remote participant tests. Remote participant test.
That's what Anthony. Okay, gotta go try it.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one.
Say it right there. And it just goes, goodbye.
You know what? I could really. Like, listen to like. Maybe they're still in the Rhode Island and the state that's how I can find them. And I'm like hanging out with you.
Oh, weird.
it is, but is he? Yeah. Yeah, I think we should go ahead and get started. Do we need to review the procedures, Mike?
We'll figure it out. I've got Josh here to help me manage it, so. Yeah, so the only thing with the Zoom, of course, just use the raise hand function. If you want to get called on when we get to the public hearing, or put your video on and wave with your hands and we'll try to notice you and recognize you. Wait till the chair recognizes you to comment, and I think that's most of the general rules.
So does anyone want to, does any commissioner want to move approval of the agenda?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'm fine.
Right, comments from the chair? I don't have any comments. I'm just excited to get to the, our first public hearing on the city plan 2025. And Mike will take it away on the next.
So we'll make sure this is close enough to me. All right. So I'm Mike Miller. I'm the planning director for the city of Montpelier, and we're very excited to get to the public hearing portion of the city plan rewrite. So this has been a process. It's been many years, depending on how you're counting, 7 years, 8 years to get here. And it's been a long process because we were going to rewrite the plan with two big goals in mind. The first was we wanted to make sure that we were trying to make a step forward in the process. So we decided to shift to an online plan. And the reason for that was it's going to offer a lot more opportunities going forward. There'll be there's more that you can do with an online. We can have videos, we can have maybe dashboards in the future. So we'll have other possibilities of things that we can do with this new platform as we move forward. But for now, we needed to just make that big step, make the transition. These across the country, online plans across the country have gotten much better, have acted as a much better communication tool. So getting input, giving information out, getting information back. The online documents have shown across the country that these work very well for that. And this is a first step. Obviously, we'll keep moving it forward as we do amendments to try to keep improving on the format and the document. The second thing we wanted to work on was to make this a more actionable implementation plan. So that's what took most of the time, was to make the actionable plan. We wanted to make sure that we had good conversations about how, let's talk about what we didn't want. We didn't want to have a plan where we were encouraging accessory apartments and supporting economic development, because those as policies don't actually do anything. So we wanted to actually say, okay, you can't encourage it. What are we going to do to make more accessory apartments, and come up with actual tools that will give us a guidepost, a guiding into the future of, this is what we should be doing in order to make this. And that's working with developers, working with, if we're talking housing developers and the housing committee, to try to come up with a plan for how we're going to do this. And there are 12 chapters. So one of the other shifts was we went back to the traditional 12 chapters. So there are 12 topic areas. A lot of them are set in statute. So you've got to have energy plans, transportation plans, land use plans, housing plans, historic resources. There's just requirements that are there. And so we've kind of tried to go back to that format, so that way it's easy to find what you're looking for. An online document with an actionable implementation plan. So those were some of the big things. So of course, when we get to the plan and we show it to you, it's of course set up in two distinct sets. You've got the storyboards, the story maps, and you've got the implementation plans. And the story maps are designed to give that 30,000-foot view of what are our goals, what are we trying to do, what are the background information, and then your implementation plans are really getting down to the nuts and bolts. That should be your policymakers, your committees. If you're on the housing committee, we would want them working with this document to set up what their strategic plans would be going forward. So let me just jump in. I don't have a presentation. We're gonna save you guys that pain. But what I'll do is show you where to find the plan, and hopefully we'll see if this works. Do we have speakers or no? Yes, okay. So I'm gonna try to show a video that we put together that's now just been added to the city plan page. We'll get that approved. So that way it's hey, I'll give you the one more. And then we'll take some public comments from everybody onto what it is. And I'm gonna see if I can just move this down here. So it is the City of Montpelier's website. Also, two buttons under here that will show if you go to and this is the document right here, and this is the video. Let's see if this actually works. So this will give a little bit of a summary on how to navigate the plan, but it also gives a summary of the plan, enough to get people started. So let's see, we've got enough. The volume is. Let's go through this real quick. All right, so I'll just turn that off. So if you go through the video, I'll just go through this really quick, what's in the video. What we want people to know is that's the first thing. Everything, there's a plan factor. You're gonna do- Which one? We have 12 different chapters. Topics that go through. And each one has three pieces. It has a story map, it has a PDF, which is just the PDF version of the story map, and an implementation plan. So what the video helps you with navigating is just to show you when you're looking for things, how to navigate the maps, because this is really what makes this a little bit unique and special, is that we have these maps, and if you go to the right, you have pluses and minuses that let you zoom in. You can grab the maps and move them, so you can change your location. You can zoom out. If you want to go back to reset it, you can hit the home page. So you have all these options for being able to move around, to zoom in, to see the information in a much closer, if you want to actually zoom in close to your house, you can actually go and see it. You also have on the right-hand side, various, in this particular map, you also have buttons. So you could go in and say, well, just show me the wetlands, and it will just show you the wetlands. And so these are the ones that are being regulated. And we have all these different ones here. This happens to be natural resources, so it has surface waters, vernal pools, floodplains, the riparian corridor, forest blocks. They're all various natural resources. Whether it's just information, if you it's a lot of information that important to note that this itself regulatory Green conservation plan, that is the fact that this is showing what was in the green print. The state has identified as a forest block, and it doesn't have regulatory. So it was important.
Mike, we cannot hear you.
You guys aren't able to hear me?
Yes, yes, as you moved away, we could not hear you, sir.
Oh,
You're
sorry.
kind of distorted and cutting in and out a lot. So we're missing a lot of what you're saying.
Keep the microphone closer to my face.
Yes, you are going in and out.
So we've got synergy.
We cannot hear you.
Is this doing any better?
Barely.
No, we can't hear you.
Should be working.
It just got loud.
Is it working now?
Yes.
That sounds better.
All right, so we have turned up the volume on the mic. Apparently that was our issue here. Apologies about some of the how to navigate the maps. A I'll go back really quickly just to go through and say, these maps are all interactive. They let you zoom in and zoom out using these features here. The comment I was making after that was about the fact that this is a city plan. It is not a regulatory document. So the fact that whether it is this green print conservation, this was just part of a planning effort from 2012, or whether we were talking about the forest conservation, the interior forest blocks. These are all areas that are identified at the state level as important natural resources. This being a natural resource plan, we know those resources, but the document itself is not a regulatory one. So,
Mike, it's very garbled.
this microphone.
We can't hear you, Mike.
We're trying to figure that out. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we'll try a different microphone.
All right, we're going to go with a different microphone. This one, okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we will try with the new microphone.
Oh, much better. Thank you.
All right. So the maps are all interactive, and the other parts of this plan include the synergies. What happens with a lot of these chapters is you talk about something like public transportation. That could be part of energy, that could be part of transportation. So the synergies just tries to talk about how this chapter interacts with the other chapters. And in this case, we talk about utilities and facilities, land use, transportation, all impact or are impacted by natural resources. And then we have the implementation summary. And the last part is who's involved. And that discusses all the different departments or commissions. We have a conservation commission, we have a parks commission, we have various departments, all that play a part in natural resources in this case. And losing my last piece. So the last section, so the PDF is simply a written document that shows that story map. It's not interactive. So that's if people don't want to go through the story map and just want to print out the text of the chapter, they can do that. And we'll get to a final section when we do additional resources. The 12 implementation plans, these were the ones that were developed by the committees. So the Conservation and the Parks Commission worked on this natural resources plan. Every plan, implementation plan has an aspiration. What is our future vision? What are we trying to accomplish? And then we break that into bite-sized pieces. And in this case, we've got 8 different goals to try to accomplish our aspiration. And then we have a set of strategies. In this case, probably has 2 pages of strategies. All of the highest priority ones are up top. And some of them are talking about continuing a program. Some of them are talking about new programs. And so each one has a priority, a cost. It lets you know which goals are being implemented, who's the responsible party, whether it's a conservation commission, whether it's public works. So there are a number of goals and strategies laid out for each one of the chapters. And the last piece, let me go back, is if you are not interested in going through all of the online versions, there is also a full archival Montpelier City Plan 2025. And this is a PDF, and we're going to be getting approval from the Planning Commission to update that with a newer version. Once the hearing is warned, we can't make any changes. So we haven't been able to make changes for about 6 weeks. So we have a stack of changes sitting in the queue to go through and do some updates, one of which is to make an updated archival copy. And that will have a cover, that'll have table of contents. We had a couple of recommendations from our attorneys on how to improve it. They have reviewed this plan, and this plan does meet legal requirements. It's just, there are ways that could make it better, and so we're gonna make those improvements once the planning commission gives staff the okay to do that. So that is that's what the full archival version is, probably 200 and some pages long, and you could print that out and look at it. So I'm gonna stop sharing because we wanted to keep this short, and open this to comments, and we'll let the chair choose. We've got people online and people here in the audience. We'll just start taking comments and input and go from there.
Okay, so this is first time, so should I just have people, a mix of raising hands online and in the audience for people who want to comment, or just people come up to the podium?
I would have people just raise their hands
Okay,
and just start picking them, whether they're online or here.
okay,
And if they're online, Josh might have to mute them or unmute them, but you might, actually, you guys have been able to unmute yourself, so.
okay, all right. Who wants to go first? Oh, great, okay. Yeah.
Hi there, Anthony Irupino, a resident of Saban Street and a Montpelier downtown business owner. Thank you so much to the Planning Commission for volunteering. I know it's a lot of work. And I can also say, just by way of compliment, in my legal practice for developers in both Act 250 and the public utilities context, we have to read a lot of municipal plans, and they're oftentimes very painful to read from a formatting perspective, and the changes you've made in the formatting make this a very much more enjoyable experience. Now, speaking as a resident, there's a lot that I agree with in the plan as you've written it, and I'm not going to go through all of that, but I do want to highlight that the area of biggest concern for me, and I think for many, is housing and changing the perception that's out there, as reflected in a 7 Days article from a couple of years ago, where a prominent developer was quoted as saying that Montpelier is really considered in the development community as a no-build zone. So I think this plan takes some positive steps in trying to change that perception. You know, the goals, I think, from adding housing as first and foremost, get people that are unsheltered sheltered, but also, you know, grow the tax base, grow the utility base, improve affordability, and make sure that we have an inclusive town that is both income diverse and age diverse. So I support a lot that's already reflected in the plan. One of the biggest areas of support is mixed use areas outside of our existing downtown floodplain areas. We've seen how vulnerable our town is and the historic downtown to flooding, and we know that problem is not going away. So I support the concept of looking around our community for other areas besides the traditional downtown, where we can have not just residential, but also mixed use services. I very much agree with what you've said in the plan in terms of variety of housing at price points, owner occupied, rental, different densities. That is a really positive message in the plan. I also want to say that I like that the plan is phrased in terms of our needs being at least 240 units over the life of the plan. It's not a ceiling, it's a floor that we should be shooting for, because I think it's great to get to that 5% vacancy. But as I said before, we want to make sure that we're going beyond that, making sure that we're taking the median price down so that people can afford to live here and afford to live here at all different stages of their life. And that we're also acknowledging that we may lose some housing stock to flooding in the future years. So when it comes to the growth center, I love how you have the maps that show the different options. I would encourage the city to go as big as we can, because I think there are some areas that are shown on the map, like Dairy Lane is one great example. I didn't find another area to compare it to, but it's pretty well built up in that neighborhood. But the reality is it's also very walkable to downtown, even though there aren't sidewalks there. If you go up in that neighborhood, you'll see kids playing like soccer in the streets. Like it's very pedestrian friendly, even though the infrastructure isn't there. So, and I think there are other areas in the city where we could go big for the growth center. In terms of one suggestion I have in terms of a slight tweak to the plan language, I do very much support the notion that we need to continue efforts to amend our zoning to make sure that we have a right balance between the cost to go through the zoning and the values that it protects and the benefits that we're actually getting. I do think there are areas where we might be over prescribing, particularly the number of plans and the expense in terms of the professionals that one would have to hire to submit preliminary plans to move forward with it. And so you have a marketing strategy, which I think is great to reach out to developers after you've developed programs. And I would say, why not just also do that as programs are being developed? Let's invite developers in, really understand what it takes to make projects pencil out in this day and age, and make sure that they feel like they have some ownership in guiding the development of our programs to achieve the fantastic goals that are reflected in this plan. So very much encouraged, want to encourage us to think about going big for housing. I think the plan reflects a lot of strategies to do that, and I thank you for your work on this.
Yeah. Hey.
Thank you. Evening. I'll echo a lot of what the previous comment was in terms of this plan represents a ton of work. So thank you for putting the work in. Thank you for serving our community. Special thanks to Mike Miller and staff who have done most of that heavy lifting. My name is James Moore. I live up off of Town Hill on Leapfrog Hollow with my wife and 3 kids. My wife is chair of the school board. All 3 of our kids are in the local schools. And I'm starting a new business in the development space, looking to bring new housing here to Montpelier. And it's been an educational process. I'll start with the fact that I love Montpelier. I think it's a fantastic place. Lived here for the last couple decades at least, and look forward to seeing Montpelier's. I think our best days should be ahead of us. I think Montpelier has the opportunity to be the greatest tiny city in the country. And I looked up, best small towns, and they're all bigger than Montpelier by an order of magnitude. So I went with tiny. I think we can do that because we have a few core ingredients that we can build off of. We have a vibrant downtown that needs some attention from the resiliency standpoint for sure, but I also think brings a lot to the community. I think we have growth potential. We have a relatively small 10 square miles to work with, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for additional housing and additional businesses here in Montpelier. And then finally, I think we have also have existing green space for recreation and health purposes, and the ability to maintain and if maybe expand that. But in my personal opinion, I'd like to see a plan that is more aggressive and is more visionary than the current draft. I think key to our success will be significantly more housing. We have sometimes we have big city tastes on a tiny city budget, and we need to focus on bringing more revenue in here. And I think we have roughly 4,000 housing units in the city right now. I think we should be having conversations about another 1,500 over the next 20 years, another 2,000 over the next 20 years. I think that is very achievable in our community. And from a smart growth perspective, if we're not building it here in Montpelier, we're going to see more development on 5 and 10 acre lots, driving more fragmentation in our natural resources outside of our city. So I realize that our city has rural zoning. I think that's kind of crazy in 10 square miles. I think we should have parks and neighborhoods for the most part, and a vibrant downtown. Key to that from a development standpoint is the growth center exemption, at least for the next few years. here in this window as we're waiting for other state policy to come in with the tier 1A and B. And the reason is Act 250 exemption. So we're looking specifically at designing and building triplexes, quadplexes, townhome style. We could build 2 quadplexes, and after that, we'd be brought into the Act 250 process. And development at that scale cannot handle the cost of the Act 250 process, cannot handle the risk of developing in the Act 250 process. So we would go to other communities to look to build. And I live here. I want to be part of the housing solution here in Montpelier. So I think clear, ambitious goals are important. I think they should be double or triple on the housing side, what is stated in the plan, in the draft plan. I think we need the policies that match and facilitate those goals being met. I'm not certain that the policies on the implementation side right now support the modest goals that are in the plan. It doesn't feel like much is changing in terms of what we're actually going to do. And then finally, I'd love to see more accountability mentioned in the plan. What are you going to be measuring on an annual basis? What are we going to be returning to see, are we being successful? What changes do we need to make to stay on track with the plan so that we don't find ourselves 10 years from now looking back on it? That was a great plan. What happened? So I hope to be part of the solution. Thanks for your work.
Okay, thanks. Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love, you can email Mike also too, but I'd love to know specifically which policies you feel like are, which policies you saw in the plan that feel like not much is changing,
Yeah.
just to be more specific.
I think there's a call out in the implementation plan on the housing side that speaks to reviewing our zoning. I think our zoning is challenging for the size community that we are. We are I'm trying to create a new lot to build on right now. Purchased a house, subdividing the parcel, trying to create a buildable lot. And because that lot will have more than 2 units on it, if we do a triplex, for example, you get pulled right back into major site plan review, which adds probably 8 weeks to the process, which adds probably $2,000 to $5,000 in professional fees, because you have to get a licensed lighting engineer to do your lighting plan. You have to get a licensed landscape architect to do your planting plan. And right now that property is costing me $5,000 a month to hold. So anytime you insert 8 more weeks of process and additional professional fees, it can just take a project that was marginal to begin with and just say, it's not worth it. And I think it's very easy to, and there are lots of little examples like that throughout our zoning. I think our zoning downtown, we have a floodplain. We need to elevate new buildings. Our height restrictions haven't changed. So if you elevate buildings and then you have 2 floors of housing in a gable, you're at the height restriction. That probably doesn't mean that building's ever going to pencil financially. We need to be able to go higher. So it's just, there's little stuff throughout 200 pages. And I'd be very happy to go through it and find detail with you all.
That's really helpful, but I, just for the purposes of the city plan, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe you'd like more. I get that goal is pretty vague about working on the zoning, but you'd like more to see more specificity, it sounds like.
I think specificity, I think streamlining, I think form-based zoning. I think there's a lot that could be done to change that narrative that the first speaker mentioned about Montpelier being a no-build zone.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Laura La Rosa. I'm a resident of Montpelier, and I'm here more as a parent of a 5-year-old child, and I forgot my notes at home, but hopefully I'll remember what I want to say. So my child's 5. When I was 4 months pregnant, I got on waiting lists for every licensed daycare center in Montpelier, thinking I was, ahead of the game because I was 4 months pregnant. It took 2 years before a child care center contacted us to say, we have an opening, would you be interested? So during that year and a half, my husband and I were responsible for taking care of my child. Fortunately, there was a pandemic and my husband was laid off from work. And so he was the primary caretaker, but not everybody can be so lucky to have a pandemic happen while they're waiting for childcare. So I'm just saying that to emphasize the importance of having like an assertive city plan when it comes to childcare. And there's 2 specific things that I noticed. One is there's a part in like the community services section that says the country club property could include something about childcare. I'd say should. It's not contractually binding and it sounds more assertive. And then in the economic development part, I think I recommended this before, it would be good if there was some committee or group from the city that can talk to the administration, governor's administration about, I don't know, some daycare center for state employees, because nothing brings people in to a location more regularly than dropping your kid off at a daycare that's available to them. And that's a benefit that could draw people back into the downtown and have them spend more money. So thank you.
Holly, I saw you first, sorry.
Hi, I'm Holly Nickel, and I also wanted to acknowledge the tremendous amount of work that went into this. There were many things that I was pleased to see in the plan. I certainly won't list them all, but recognition that housing is a key to economic development, support for the Housing Trust Fund, and expansion of the Grove Center is appropriate, just to name a few. I really focused on probably half the chapters: housing, land use, historic resources, resilience, and economic development. One housekeeping item, maybe it was just me, but I found some of the maps, not all of them, incredibly hard to read, even when I zoomed in, because when I was trying to orient myself, some of the street names were so faint and the colors were so dark that I couldn't really tell, except for some of the main streets, what I was looking at. On the housing section, there were a couple of things that I expected to see addressed that weren't there. I know that you said that the goal is a mix of housing types, but I think we need to acknowledge that our housing market is really stuck because we have a lot of small 1- and 2-person households, often seniors, who are living in large homes that could be occupied by housing if senior appropriate housing was available. And it's not even mentioned in the demographic section of the housing, the demographic part of the housing section, household size. So that was one thing. I would also hope to see another strategy around the reuse of existing office buildings that are vacant or largely vacant, and those underutilized parking lots. And even some long-term vacant properties that could be converted to housing that weren't. I think that should be in there. I think we do have an opportunity, perhaps with fewer state employees working downtown. A minor detail on the housing section: the implementation strategy talks about the city sponsoring at least one housing project, and to me that was unclear. I think of sponsoring as the city playing a role as developer. So that was just a clarity issue. I also looked at the land use section in some detail. And although it does talk about acquiring and maintaining parkland, I think there should be more specific mention of the areas along the river for flood control and green space. I was shocked at driving down River Street the other day to notice that there's new storage sheds. And just personal opinion, but I don't think, given our flooding experience, we should be allowing more development in the river corridor. I think we should be encouraging wetlands and green space. And just as an aside, you know, we've lost so many of the birds and other creatures that used to nest along the river because we allowed years ago the construction of the storage sheds and the bike path, which I love and I walk on all the time, but there used to be a lot of wildlife that's no longer there because it's more built up. The historic resource section, I think we all agree that we have lots of wonderful historic resources in Montpelier. But the section acknowledges the tension with the energy plan. But regarding floodplains, it just says many buildings were built in the floodplain without proper mitigation and resilience to damage. And then it says with proper preservation techniques, these buildings can be brought up to code and still provide value as described earlier in the plan. And I am skeptical about that, I have to say. And there's nothing in that section that it talks about the challenges of doing that. And it kind of felt like to me, unlike some of the other plans, sections, and in spite of the synergies chart, that this was kind of sitting out there by itself saying we have to identify more historic properties without really addressing the interconnectedness of some of the issues that the city faces with these historic properties. And then finally, the economic development section, which talks about outdoor recreation as an economic driver. I would also suggest maybe greenways and wetlands. I mean, North Branch Nature Center gets people from all over the state, but wetlands, you know, the West Rutland Marsh, places like that draw people who are birders or naturalists. And I think we have opportunities here and those kind of things could be acknowledged perhaps as an economic development driver as well. So thank you. And thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you. Thank you.
I also want to thank you all for the incredible leadership doing this work and all the work that went into the plan. My name's Allie Richards. I'm a citizen of Montpelier and the mom of identical twin 6-year-olds who were lucky enough to go to Turtle Island. I'm here to back up what Laura just said and talk about childcare. In my day job, I've had the ability to see the movement of high quality affordable childcare. I run Less for Kids, and we passed one of the biggest laws in the country, actually the most expansive bill in the country. And what we were able to do is basically push public investment into a system so it's no longer automatically a bankrupting model to run a childcare. So I've had the pleasure of going around the state and helping open 1,000 new childcare spaces and new programs, 100 new programs and expansions within current programs. The one place we're really not seeing that at all is Montpelier, my own hometown. It's heartbreaking, the shadow of the capital that passed this huge public investment. In fact, one of the largest childcare centers we have here, incredible one that I and many others have had the ability to work and thrive in this community in Turtle Island, may have to leave town or close when they already have 300 kids on their wait list. So I applaud you all for putting this in here. The aspirations and goals are beautiful. I don't see a lot of strategies. I just want to offer support. There is help. There's help through this bill, the public investment. There's also help through First Children's Finance Vermont. It's basically like a small business development center for specialized technical assistance for the sector of childcare. It exists in Vermont. It works with planning commissions and other entities to help communities do this or individual centers expand, make more viable business options. One of the reasons I believe that Montpelier does not have childcare blossoming with this passage of the bill is because space is too much of a premium. It's too expensive. And it's too hard to find. And that's exactly what is we're seeing in real time with Turtle Island. So it's a huge opportunity for the city to step up with some serious leadership and help fill that gap, identify space, support the rental of a space or the ownership of the space in some way. that is, I think, what is specifically holding Montpelier back. And again, think about the comments we've heard about housing, childcare. We will not function as a community if we don't have childcare. There are 300 kids on the wait list today. That's not a viable community. So obviously we need to have a diverse age and demographic community here to thrive. And childcare is a huge piece of the puzzle. I really do believe there is a moment here. And again, there's beautiful aspirations. I'd love to see that flesh out more as a plan and just know there are resources available. And I'm happy to support that. I know many other community members are as well. Thank you.
Not black and white.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Wilczek. I live in Montpelier. I was on your Act 250 Commission for 6 years. I was on the Montpelier Alive Board for about 6 years. I'm a lawyer in town. I want to talk about three things. They really support what everybody else has said. One is a request that in the plan, I know your hands are tied, but I want to talk about appeals, and I have a specific request for the city plan. Appeals from a zoning permit or a DRB decision can kill a project. It can deter developers, and your hands are tied because you have to follow, the zoning regulations have to follow the state statute. And the state statute is section 4465, and it has such a broad, it gives such a broad ability for neighbors to oppose neighbors' projects. And I just want to read it to you. It's one sentence. It says an interested person includes the applicant, a person owning property in the immediate neighborhood. So that's even beyond an adjoining landowner, who can demonstrate a physical or environmental impact on the person's property. And this is my favorite part, or a group of 10 people voting or owning property anywhere in the city. 10 people can easily be gathered to oppose any of these big developments that we need. We need big childcare centers. We need condos so our seniors can have a great place to live. I would love to see the city plan say on your zoning section, we, the city of Montpelier, are going to request the legislature to change this language to narrow the circumstances under which anyone can have the right to appeal. I have several ideas about it, but I hate to tell you, it doesn't really matter. You can make things easier. You can have all these aspirational goals, but it takes one person to kill a project. So you can't do anything, but you can put language in your city plan. You can ask the city council members to use our lobbyists to try to work with the representatives. Second point is, as an Act 250 commissioner, I saw firsthand how expensive a little project can become. The numerous plans you have to have, many state agencies participate, and they'll tell you, oh, we all settle, we don't litigate. Well, they settle because they give you a whole bunch of conditions, and if you don't agree, they threaten to oppose your project. And so I think we need to think really big picture. We need to think Vermont College, Sabin's Pasture, all the way to Elks Crow. That's our new area. That's out of the flood zone. That Sabin's Pasture area, which I live right across the street from, that needs to be a dynamic place, mixed uses, trails that people can still enjoy, but we need to be thinking outside of the downtown, recreating for future generations. That whole area should be part of a growth center, because anything that happens in that area, people are going to come out and oppose it because of the entrenched NIMBYism we have in our community. So please think bigger, big picture, larger growth centers for that whole corridor. Let's make that happen looking 10, 20 years down the road. And my last point, so tonight I just took a whirl through the subdivision regulations, and I wish I had a red pen, because it's so still entrenched of this concept of regulation, process trumping progress. We have traded growth for these checklists of all the things developers need to do. So I would highly recommend in your city plan to have as a goal to minimize the number of the number of requirements needed to build multi-unit housing in Vermont and condo developments. James Moore has some ideas, but that can really be shortened. And that ties into my appeal concern. every requirement you have in zoning, there are some exceptions, but it gives somebody a basis to appeal. So I would really look at the city plan, put in some specific language, the planning commission shall review the zoning regulations to minimize the number of requirements needed to get subdivision approval, zoning permits that don't require that. And I think we really need that. Working in Montpelier during the day, it feels like our city's dying, although Friday night it was very alive. But we need more bodies in town, and we're not going to do that without big projects. So I'd love to see a little bit more direction in there and a little bit of teeth. But thank you so much for your work.
You in the gray?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Peter Sterling. I've lived in Montpelier since 2010, and before that I lived up in Worcester. But first, thank you all for volunteering and spending your time to help make our community a better place. In my time in this area, I've really seen the rent in Montpelier become so unaffordable for younger people. When I say young, I mean like under 30. Really noticed the energy in town has changed. I'm also a landlord in town, and I primarily rent to people under 35. And boy, I know the waiting list for childcare is bad, but if I put an ad up for my 2 bedrooms, I have to take it down within 2 hours because I have, I don't know, 60 inquiries. Almost all of them are legit. I mean, you can, even when I've talked to the people who moved out, they almost always leave this area. They don't rent another place in this area. There's nowhere to live, especially for younger renters, who aren't looking for a full house. So really encourage you to think long and hard about how we're going to make Montpelier more affordable for, the next generation, which we all want to see living here. I like a lot of the ideas that I heard from some of the previous speakers when James Moore. Montpelier really should strive to be a small city, not a rural community, but just a little bit downtown. And, we have a lot of services we want to offer people, and a lot of it's getting older. I don't think I'm the only one probably to say, our streets are in pretty rough shape, and we need a tax base to help keep that moving forward. I was also on the Montpelier School Board for 4 or 6 years. And, the question we always had in front of us was, how do we make sure that their kids come into our school? And that's the way to keep a good school going, is make sure we have enough kids. And, we need young people who want to have kids to move here. And that is definitely a problem, I think. I also like what I heard earlier about how we should have a vision for how many more units we should have. I think I heard someone say we should have about 1,000 new units in the next 20 years. That sounds fantastic to me. I don't see any real downside as long as we cite them right, which I'm sure we could. And again, I also want to say, I love our downtown and I love living in this town. I want to see it continue to be vibrant. And I think unless we make it possible for people to move here, who, especially younger people, we're not going to have the Montpelier, I think, that we've all, like so much. So thank you for listening to my comments.
You with the green shirt?
Thank you. I'm Thomas Weiss, civil engineer, resident of District 2. And I've got 3 points I'd like to make tonight. I've got 12 pages of comments that I'll give to you later. The first is the decision to have the official plan online. The official plan, as far as I can tell, is scattered among 41 URLs. Plus, there are a lot of photographs that are unattributed, and I can't download them when I download the HTML documents that contain that from ArcGIS. So that my experience is that those photographs are scattered somewhere else on the internet in places that we can't find. So my question and comment is that how do we define what is the plan that you will be voting on and then presenting to the city council to vote on, so that we know what it is? The ArcGIS.com site has 3 pages. Each chapter has a page that's a PDF on the city's site. And it goes on from there. And there actually happen to be 2 links to 2 different sites for the implementation plans, one from the chapters page and the other from within the chapter itself. And so my recommendation is to make the official plan a physical plan and provide a PDF copy of that official plan online. Second point is grounding the plan in Vermont statutory requirements for a city plan. I read through the city plan and then I compared it to the statutory requirements in chapter 117 as to what belongs in a plan. And I found a large mismatch. There were many things that the statutes call for that I did not find addressed in the text of the city plan, the draft city plan. And that's most of what these 12 pages of comments are on, is specifically areas that I found that I thought the plan really needed to be bolstered on. And so my recommendation, overall recommendation on that is that you take my comments and the other comments tonight, come up with a revised draft city plan, warn and hold another public hearing after that happens, because of the scope of the changes. And the last item has to do with food security. Food security is an important issue. The city plan addresses it only with regard to the feast program and the Montpelier Senior Activity Center as an issue that affects seniors only. I suggest that you expand the food security component of the plan to cover more people, to encourage small gardens in the neighborhood so that people can pop out their door and harvest some vegetables for supper rather than having to go 10 or 15 minutes away to some larger community garden. So those are my 3 general comments, and I'll provide you with the detailed comments later. I know you don't want to hear them tonight, and I don't want to give them tonight. So thank you very much for your work on this plan.
Thank you.
Saw your hand first.
My name is Nathan Suter. I'm a resident of Montpelier. My wife teaches in the school system. I have 2 kids in the high school. I first want to echo the gratitude, the work you're doing tonight and the preparation of this, both the staff and the planning commission. Thank you for your time. I think I may be outside of Mr. Weiss's comments a little bit because of his attention to statute. One way I think about a master plan for a city or a town is I want it to give permission for things that can happen. Think of it as fertile ground for ideas or things to grow. I think I primarily came here tonight to talk about housing. I want to echo what James said, but I want to double. I think he said 2 or 3 times what was in the plan. I'd like to see, can we do 150 units a year for the next 10 years? Could we double the amount of housing units in Montpelier in the next 10, 15, or 20 years? You hear often retirees come speak at meetings like this or at city council and complain that they're at risk of being priced out of town. I would argue that one of the reasons they're saying that is we have too small a tax base for the appetite or for the services that we all want. Let's double that tax base. It takes an investment now to do that, now in the next 10, 15 years. And then I would like us to ask, so what would it take, right? Could we double the housing in 15 years? What would it take? I think it would take more density, more vertical height in the core areas, an expansive growth area. In the plan, you mentioned the housing trust fund, which I think is a cool idea. I think it's grossly underfunded for what it wishes to do. I the next thing falls into the area maybe of give permission to as opposed to direct. I'm not sure that this fits in the master plan, but if there were a housing, revolving housing loan fund that were city, of Montpelier, right there, I know that there are things happening in the state, maybe about revolving loan funds for housing development. Let's not wait for the state to get it right. I don't think that that's a good bet. So what would it take to have a revolving loan fund in a quasi-governmental or city government adjacent organization of $10 to $20 million? So that if James Moore or myself or anybody else comes knocking on the door and says, here's what I'd like to do with the VCIL lot, right? That's a lot that's a half a block off of State and Main. It's got a big footprint. You go 5 stories, not quite sure that pencils out. If it's all housing and you've got some floodable stuff on the first floor, what if it's 7 stories? What does it take to get to yes? What does it take to add 25, 30, 40 units at a time to our city and to our tax base? I'd love to see that. And if that revolving loan fund means that some of that money's out and then it comes back in an equity balloon payment after 7 years and it feeds another project, that's great. And so I'd love to see some really aggressive things like that happen in the city. Whatever we can do within the plan that again gives permission for something like that to happen. I would love to see that. Similar to Peter, I'm also a landlord in this town. I just listed a unit, and we're always faced with turning down wonderful people who want to move here from away, who cannot find housing here in favor of somebody else who's also wonderful. Not only that, but when I price a unit, I'm rarely really worried about price sensitivity. Wouldn't it be great if I had to lower my rents to compete for good tenants? That has not happened, and it's not going to happen in the near future. I think we can make it so that Peter and I have to compete for good people instead of not worrying about that at all. In settings like this, I always want to ask who's not in this room. Everybody I see here lives in this town, and I think most of us own property in this town. How about all the people who want to live here, who want to rent here, who want to buy here? Could that same, whether it's Montpelier Development Corporation or something like that, could we form a group that can buy up multi-unit properties, compete with me, compete with Peter or whomever else to buy up a 6-unit property, get it up to code, and then condoize it and sell those off as entry-level housing in Montpelier? We have almost no entry-level housing, right? If I'm 27, 1 kid, 2 kids, how am I going to buy into this town? We want to make that possible. I think I'll stop there. I'm grateful for you being here. Oh, just how do we get $10 to $20 million into a revolving loan fund? Central Vermont Medical Center, I think already provides seed funding for some housing development or redevelopment. Let's go to our bigger businesses. Let's go to our medium-sized businesses. There are numerous white-collar businesses in and around this community who cannot hire because folks can't find housing. They're motivated to fund housing. Let's take them up on that. And I'm a taxpayer. In fact, I'm a taxpayer on a number of properties. Tax me to fund a bond that funds that revolving loan fund. I'll happily pay those taxes because in the long run, it's going to make our community viable, thriving, and survive into the future. So thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. I just wanted to echo what has been said before. I really appreciate the work of the planning office and your efforts putting this document together. I'm really excited about the opportunities that it presents. It's clearly a lot of work. I think there's a lot more ground to cover, but I'm excited to see some action occurring. My name is Zachary Hunter. I've been a resident here in Montpelier since 2010. I've owned 2 homes. I own an apartment building here, and I have 2 school-age children in the school system here. I've also been a construction professional for the past 20 years. And I want to just share a few observations. When I review the city plan, the piece that I'm most excited about, because it's my area of expertise, is certainly housing. I also think it's exciting because it probably more than any other chapter touches all of the others. I think if we can improve the housing scenario in Montpelier, a lot of these other things will fall in line. So I have a few observations, and a lot of this actually relates to, I think, what will happen next as we continue to revise the city plan and we push towards some real meaningful changes to the zoning, because that's ultimately what's going to drive a lot of the execution of the city plan as far as it relates to housing. So observation number one, it's already been touched on, but we really need to focus on revenue. Like most Vermont municipalities, Montpelier continues to face budgetary pressure. We've exhausted the cutting tool. I think we've all witnessed that over the last couple of years, whether we look at this year's municipal budget or the last couple of seasons of the school budget. There's no meat left on the bone. We need to work on revenue. This seems even more pressing, given the fact that probably state workers are not going to come back to a pre-pandemic level, and we need to figure out a way to backfill the revenue that those folks represent. Number two, we really need to expand the growth center designation. So I'd encourage you to take a very close look at that and get as aggressive on that line as possible. Larger projects like the Country Club Road, we're starting to hear a little bit of rumbling about Sabins Pasture. They will have significant impact, but the scale and timing of their delivery remains pretty uncertain. In the meantime, we should work aggressively to enable smaller scale, high density infill projects. In aggregate, infill could have a meaningful and perhaps more immediate impact on our housing goals, but without expanding the growth center designation, small scale developers may quickly come against Act 250 regulation. And as has already been discussed, that may impact whether or not these projects can happen. Number three, I think we should refine zoning development standards where necessary. For example, I know you were asking about some specific aspects of zoning that have an impact. One piece that James was talking about, I think, is related here. The density exception in zoning section 3002.c.3b allows for municipally connected lots to build up to 6 units. I think this is a really progressive and exciting step, but it is complicated by section 3201A, which mandates that major site plan review for projects exceeding 2 units go through it mandates that major site plan review for projects for exceeding 2 units. So that's not an impossible thing, but as expressed previously, that adds time to a project and certainly a closer review from other professional services, and time is money. Number four, every time I look at the zoning map, I have to take a very close look to identify what zone I'm actually in. And I'm always surprised that for a town as geographically small and as small in population, that we have so many different zones. I think that it is far too granular and that we should focus on consolidating that if possible. We should laser focus on the objective criteria in those zones, and rather than looking at subjective neighborhood characteristics and architectural standards. I think zoning language should be very clear and prescriptive. It should minimize the interpretations that the planning office or the DRB or citizens that are trying to execute projects need to impose to figure out what needs to actually occur. To conclude, in reviewing the draft city plan, I support housing goals, but I really worry that it's not ambitious enough. It's conceivable that the target of 30 new units per year over the next 8 years drastically underestimates actual demand. Furthermore, this 30-unit target could be as much as double, if you can believe it, as much as double what we've achieved on average over the last 10 years. So not only maybe is it not enough, but it's also way more than what we've already accomplished, which to me says that on the planning side and the execution side that we're not going to get there. If we mean to effectively double, or as some have suggested, dramatically escalate how many projects are getting underway, we have to attempt to remove barriers and streamline the process at all costs. And lastly, and this is sort of out of your purview, but I think for everybody in here, and certainly at the city leadership level, this is the thing that we need the most, is really courageous and ambitious leadership on these matters. We will not achieve these goals without a great deal of community enthusiasm and support. We need city leadership to engage and educate and energize all of us regular citizens if we hope to exceed these goals to the extent that we're discussing tonight. Thanks again for all of your hard work. I'm excited for continued progress forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I did see Steve first, so.
Steve Whitaker. Well, there is some merit to the profusion of gratitude and diligence that y'all have done. Where it falls short is showing up. A number of people have had comments that have bigger impact than they know or that you know yet, as far as how far we have to go before we have a plan that's ready. I tried to raise some of these at your meetings and it was all swept off the rug. The most egregious example is on regional dispatch and on unhoused services, immediate, urgent, unhoused solutions. But with dispatch, instead, what you heard but never discussed, Mike Miller served a leading question to the police chief. Police chief says, I like it the way it is. Enough said. If that's the due diligence we're doing on a plan, that pretty much calls it out of how ineffective this is. I'm really worried that y'all have waited too long to start listening. And now there's a lot more people telling you that you've got a long way to go and we're not going to make the growth center deadline of September 30. Because we have to have an approved, adopted, and regionally adopted plan if we're going to pursue that timeframe window for the growth center. We also are lacking a vision and a plan for the Country Club Road in this plan, which needs to be a master plan, because we're not going to, and it probably needs a new town center. It is not walkable to town. It is not contiguous to anything that's walkable to town. So, and I believe that the taxpayers and the regulators are not going to allow a $20 or $30 million road, across land that original growth center application said we're going to protect this at all costs. So now our growth center application said we're going to protect this high road at all costs. Now we're going to put a road through it. So just imagine the contradiction and how that's going to land with the state regulators. So we may need to come up with a plan for Country Club Road that is the least trip generation impacts. People living there modestly in tiny homes, working the farm, walking to workshops, elderly who don't need to go out more than once or twice a week, and a shuttle service to town. We may have to live with that intersection the way it is. And that requires a specificity of planning that y'all have refused to do, and Mike has refused to do, and Josh has refused to do. And it's going to bite us hard. So I've given you, but I heard one of your members speak to the council asking just approve the White and Burke plan. The White and Burke plan says throughout it, it's a phase one. You've got to start phase two and get the public involved. So adopting or approving phase one just tells me how poor the scope, the grasp of planning is. I mean, I went to planning school. Mike's not the only planner in the shop, and y'all really would do well to, call the regional commission staff in here to teach you what needs to go in. Look at what it needs to be in a capital budget. Capital budget 5 years out, capital program 5 years out has to have every water, sewer, road, sidewalk, all those things priced out and where the money's going to come from. And we don't have that. And that's a prerequisite for the growth center. So y'all are kind of flying blind, and sorry, my annoyance comes out, but I've spent too many times talking to you for not thus far. But I think you've heard it from some smarter and less annoyed people. Maybe you'll start to take action.
Thanks. You're the only one, Peter. Go ahead.
My name is Peter Kelman. I live in the Mountain View area. I've lived here since 2016, although I've lived in Vermont for much longer than that. I probably spent more time over the past 3+ years agonizing over the city plan than anyone on the current committee here. And in fact, since I first started working on it in May 2018, when I was on the Housing Task Force, which Polly was the chair of, she's gone now. She was very modest. I probably spent more time on this plan than anyone in the city except Mike. So first, I would like to commend the past and present members of the Planning Commission for their contributions to producing this plan, one that is now nearing completion, roughly 9 years of on again, off again development. I have a big file that's that thick that goes back for almost all that time. And I'd like to also to extend my sympathies to you guys who've had to sit through hearing Mike give this exact same introduction. Actually, you guys didn't have to hear it tonight, but the exact same introduction 1,000,000 times. I've heard it quite a few times too over Zoom. So I focus primarily on housing, so I'm not going to say anything about housing today. I've given you guys tons of information about housing. The housing plan is very weak. You've heard a whole bunch of reasons why. I've given you a lot of particulars. I can give you more particulars. I can tell you that I tried 3.5 times to do infill in this town, and I finally gave up and went to Barry. Just gave up. The barriers to doing development here have never actually been clearly recognized. So what tonight I want to do instead is comment on the resilience plan. I'm glad that Ben's here. I found the resilience chapter, or is it resiliency? Because it's referred to in both different ways. There's a lot of stuff like that that needs a copy editor and a proofreader. I've said this before. It is named, anyway, the resiliency chapter I found to be generally better than many of the other chapters I've read, in that much of it appears to reflect the work and thinking of the Montpelier Commission on Recovery and Resilience. Mike says that all these committees worked on every chapter.
You mean not true?
I said bull. Okay. And this chapter is not merely Mike's reworking of what is currently in the past chapter, but reshuffled into the 12 chapters. There's very little difference substantively between this and the 2010, which actually started work on 28, and then was readopted a couple more times. That said, this chapter still suffers from some of the same problems described in my overall comments that I made 2 weeks ago. We need more usable and useful so-called interactive maps. Those maps are not useful. They're just not. We need clearer prioritization, better organization, and descriptions of the implementation strategies. Try reading some of those things. They are just not clear. They're not specific. They are, not to mention that they're not bold. Third, we need professional copy editing, proofreading by people other than those who've worked on the plan. Now, in addition, this chapter has problems of its own. One of the most serious being, in my opinion, that it is almost entirely about resilience and recovery from flooding. Now, I know that's top of mind, but how about, it's mentioned one little corner, rock slides, winter storms, extreme heat and cold, wildfires, and pandemics. To which I would add extended power outages, loss of cell phone signal or internet access, not to mention national, state, and local economic downturns or political turmoil. These are also things that we need to have resilience and recovery, and they should be in this plan. Does anyone recall the panic that was felt across the city and the state during the 2009 stock market meltdown? I remember that. How about the 1973 Arab oil embargo? I was a high school teacher at that time. You couldn't get gas anywhere. What could you do? I was driving around Montpelier last night and I said to my wife, God, this is a city of cars. What would we do if there was a situation like that again? The other, perhaps more serious problem with this chapter is unfortunately the most widespread one. And it's a problem that it shares with the overall city plan, which is, if you look at the 33 implementations in this chapter, 19 of them say continuing. 9 of them say completing. Mike talks about having language that is, actionable. How actionable is continuing, completing, improving, practicing, formalizing? There are only 2 items in this entire 33 list that even suggest something new. And they are pretty small. Create a program to replace discontinued flood-prone heating systems and develop a Montpelier, Berlin, Barry City long-term water system contingency plan. That's a good idea. But those are the only 2 new things in this entire chapter. Now, it's not to say that the majority of the things that are listed aren't valuable, only that they are a little more than what is required or well-known best practices. Where is the future-focused imagination and aspiration that a city plan for the next 8 years or so should have? In short, most of this plan, and now I'm not just talking about the resiliency chapter, reads as though Montpelier has been doing almost everything that it needs to do to ensure, in this case, resiliency and recovery. Is that really what we need from a plan that is supposed to guide our resilience and recovery efforts for the next 8 years? I don't think so, and I'm sure you don't. I was reading the land use plan, and I saw this phrase at the top. It said, guiding Montpelier for years to come. Guiding Montpelier for years to come. And just now I saw in Mike's opening, planning for the future. This plan is not planning for the future, and is certainly not planning for years to come. Now, here's where I differ from Steve. I actually would recommend that you do pass this plan on to the city council. Just pass it on. You don't have to vote, just pass it on. Let them wrestle with it, because they've got to line it up with their strategic plan. And then they can submit it and go through the formal process of getting it approved by the Regional Planning Commission and the state people who have to approve it, so that we can proceed with the TIF and the growth center and then TIF. And then immediately start to rewrite it. Immediately. Mike said at the last meeting I was at, oh, yes, we can amend it. Well, I mean, amend it big time, but not now. We don't have the time. So I would recommend that you move it along, as bad as I think it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Hi, I'm Ben Doyle. I live on Chapman Road and I'm a member of City Council. And I just want to say thank you. Like, this is a piece of work and requires leadership and commitment. And I do some community and economic development work for my day job. And I always think that planning commissions are the unsung heroes and the unacknowledged legislators of our communities. So I just really want to say thank you for your work. I would encourage you, like other people have said, to be really bold, particularly around the areas of housing. In Rutland right now, the mayor has set a goal of 1,000 new units in 5 years, right? They're twice the size of we are. So if you cut it in half, that means that we'd be doing 3 times as many houses as we are right now, if we were to meet what Rutland has set as an ambitious goal. I get that that's really aspirational, but what we need a plan to do, in addition to identifying strategies, is create the authorizing environment in which good things can happen. And, we've heard people talk about NIMBYism. We need to start like a yes in my backyard movement in this town. And that starts with a plan that's aspirational and sets out strategies to really make a difference. So I know that you're working hard to do good work. Really appreciate it. and just encourage you to keep going, keep pushing and be bold. Thank you.
Have a comment?
Online, see if anyone wants.
Yeah, I've been looking at the Zoom. I haven't seen any raised hands, but please raise your hand online if you want to make a comment. I'm not seeing any raised hands. So our next section would be discussion of input by planning commission. I personally feel like we've gotten a lot of input, which is great. I'm really excited that so many people came out. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Sean. But maybe just because I'm an introvert, I like to absorb and then come back. But I don't know if other planning commissioners want to discuss any of the input we've heard now.
Can I ask a really quick question?
Yeah.
What's the opportunity that the Arts Commission would have made a contribution to text about the Arts Commission? I saw that it was kind of a planning versus a commission oriented meeting there, and I didn't jump on.
If you have a comment on the, oh, okay, yes, please, no, please make a comment on the.
We're Joyce, the chair of the Public Arts Commission, and we read through the plan and wanted to just say two very quick things. That the Art Commission should not and does not want to oversee performing arts and festivals, which it says we do, and we do not want to oversee culinary arts. Other than that, what we do is well specified, but those two things do not belong in the purview of the Public Arts Commission.
Okay, very important.
Thank you.
So I would just say, like, my personal views are basically what Peter said at the end. And I think Mike has talked about before that this process needs to be one that we review all the time. We need to be making improvements to the plan all the time, but we do have a time crunch. And so I feel like, you know, getting a finished product is important. I think we have heard both from comments today, and there's a lot of written comments. I don't know, Mike, if everybody had access to those, but that new sort of nonprofit that's promoting housing, we had a lot of people say kind of the same thing, that we're not being ambitious enough. And I think we've heard enough people tell us that they haven't been able to get really valuable projects done, that I think we probably could make some decisions, you know, quickly to be a little bit more aspirational in those goals. But otherwise, what I've liked before, Mike, is when you kind of put together that spreadsheet of all of the input that we've had, right? And if the staff has a particular opinion, and then we can go through each one. Just then there's a systematic way that we know everybody's voice was heard, you know, that we're listening to everything. But I do think we could very quickly make some bigger goals as it relates to housing and you know, the cost of regulation, right? I mean, regulation definitely, we heard some very specific examples of somebody who, you know, wants to do a project and is up against costs, right? $5,000 a month carrying costs. Like, how do we speed that up? Can we line up the 6 units with what it takes to have a major site plan? Can we line those things up? Anyway, those are some things I think. I don't know that I'm really prepared to talk about other stuff if other people are, but I feel like let's get it done, but let's be a little bit more aspirational.
So yes, I'll put together, so just so everybody knows, anytime we do these public input, we take this very seriously and we go through and what I'll do is put together what we call a matrix. It's just an Excel table where in the first column, we put the public comment. The second column, we've got some staff recommendations. In the third column, they make a decision, and that way it gets saved in perpetuity somewhere that, you know, these were reviewed and comments were considered and decisions were made, and then we'll revise the draft to get those ultimately to have the decisions made and make the change and then advance the copy. So one question for the planning commission will be, are we going to schedule a second public hearing, or are we going to just move into having meetings to discuss the input we've received? Because that makes a difference on how we set up the agendas. So are we
okay.
continuing the public hearing to another meeting? Or are we saying we concluded the public hearing, we'll have additional meetings to talk about the input we received, and we can still take written comments, just so it's clear. We'll go through and continue to take comments, and we have a number of written comments that I've been forwarding to the planning commissioners. All of those will all be put into the matrix, all those decisions will be made, but the one question is gonna be, are we gonna have a second hearing? We're required to have one. We've had, the question will be, do we schedule a second one? Do we take comments and then the difference is if you close the public hearing, then if we decide to have another hearing, it requires that same standards we had before, so we end up adding 30 days.
I think we're at a point where there are many people that have joined us here tonight. We have half an hour left in our scheduled meeting and comments are wrapped up. I would suggest that we forego a second input meeting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that was Peter's suggestion too. I think city council, they've got goals. We've got leaders that are, setting policy, and I think we should have another session, obviously, to tighten up some of the language and add some things that we can agree on very quickly, and then get it to city council they'll have more public input hearings. I think you said before, Mike, in the last, it was like 6 months, right? I mean, I know we're up against the timeline. We hope it doesn't go 6 months, but there's a lot of public hearings on the last update.
Oh, for at the council
Yes.
level?
Yeah.
Not as much for the city plan, but for the zoning at the time, that was one of the holdups, was we ended up spending 22 meetings.
22. Okay. I hope it doesn't go down.
Yeah, we're hoping we don't have 22 meetings but that was for a complete zoning rewrite, so there was a lot of details to work through. So if that's set, then a couple of things, and we don't necessarily have to vote on it as much as just to acknowledge that it's okay. We have the list of the typos and changes and things that we found. So in the 6 weeks that have happened since we warned it, we've got a lot of input. We've also found a number of things. We had a number of comments that came in, and for example, recommendations to change the archive version. And so we have to make all those changes before we can make a new archive version. But so we're working on a number of things that have to get updated, but if we've got permission to go through and make adding the video, adding the search bar, those were things people had asked. Well, we can't add them until you guys say you can go through and add. Now that the public hearing is done, you guys can change those. All those technical changes, the typos, as Peter pointed out, we've got a list of those. We'll go through and make a bunch of edits and get the video put up. And
Do you need a motion for that? Do you need
a
a motion from us for that, or?
If you want, you guys can make a motion and just go and authorize staff to.
Okay, so I make a motion that we authorize the staff to make the edits, the grammatical and format edits that have been suggested.
Second that. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
You have to be near your microphone.
Yeah, sorry. So just very quickly, I just want to make sure that I think we heard from tonight's comments, and I think it's been on our radar for a while, but I think it's worth reiterating is, really the short-term imperative is to make sure that we get the growth center application in time. We've got 6 months to do that. I would like, given sort of the clarity of the message that we got from the comments tonight, I think it would be helpful if we had the ability to have a more focused conversation about some more substantive changes, especially like the tone and the vision of the housing chapter. I don't know that we can talk about what the realistic timeline is for getting that growth center application in and where that puts us to have those discussions. But I just wanted to say, like, I'm fine with your motion, but
Yeah, I'm just talking about the.
I just want to make sure that we can.
Not talking the substance.
Right, but if we can somehow at the same time have the staff look into making those sort of sentence level changes and grammatical changes that we can sort of get a better sense of how much time we have to do some more substantive work if we do have it. But we're still gonna review all of this input at our next meeting and.
You're asking for a reverse timeline, though, right? Is that what
Yes,
You're asking.
yeah, I want to be able to work
So to get
backwards
by
and,
this date, it has to get to the city council.
Yes. yes.
Can you do that, Mike?
Yeah, and it just depends. We have. I mean, I can throw out, we have a fifth Monday next Monday. If we wanted to meet to use that as a special meeting to talk about the input and to vote on changes, we could meet next Monday. I know you guys have had a lot of meetings, so I put that out there just as it's a fifth Monday, which means we're not competing with anybody else. That's where we could have a conversation about all the policy things. A lot of the conversation we heard was actually narrowly focused down to a handful of policy issues. How, we're not being bold enough or aggressive enough with the housing numbers. What do you want to do to that? Do you want to increase those numbers? How much do we want to increase those numbers? We know there are recommendations for additional zoning, so that those zoning changes, what should we amend in the implementation plan to reflect that, how specific? We had a conversation, Gabe missed the last meeting. We did say in our annual, for our work plan for this year is when we get the city plan done, it's that we're gonna go back into the zoning to look at all those issues, basically the exact issues you guys have brought up about the zoning. The big picture items we've solved for, the density isn't the issue, but as Gabe has pointed out, and you guys all pointed out, it's the little things at this point. It's the major site plan, it's the subdivision rules, which we knew as staff, subdivision rules. Since it was adopted in 2018, we have said we have to cut out time to get in and really update the subdivision regulations, because those came from our consultant who kind of had more, I don't know, suburban rules. So our subdivision rules were really suburban subdivision rules and not really urban subdivision rules. So we really have to go in. We've known that for a long time, but it's always just workflow and time to get in there. But this year was going to be, since this is off their plate, that's the work plan. But we should reflect that in the city plan too, that these are the issues that we'll be looking into. So it's not, we're with you on that as staff. A number of those, but we'll look through those. But those are gonna be the policy questions. I can't make those policy changes without you guys saying, yes, this, and that's what the matrix will lay out. There's a whole bunch of them. Now, we may have 20 comments, but if it really boils down to 4 policy decisions.
I just wanted, if there's a way that we can have a sense of how much time we have to engage with the policy issues, or if we have to hand this off to state council in order to realistically get that through some applications. I just don't know what that time
Yeah,
is.
sooner.
I want to make sure we're not.
Yeah.
We're not pushing it against the edge.
No, we have the flexibility. The way the rules and things are set up for putting in those applications, we have the ability to start getting in and having these preliminary applications and preliminary conversations with the state. Knowing, and the state, even last time had conversations of the growth center approval that could approve, knowing the city plan would get approved. So if, as you know, it's approved as long as X, Y, happens. And so I still want to be in a place.
But the fact that you mentioned this fifth Monday seems to indicate you're still under the gun. I mean, I'm available.
It helps, yeah, because, the timing, the big timing is, it takes an extra, when it goes to city council, they have to hold it for 30 days, so they're on the same boat we are, so.
I mean, we got some very focused feedback that I think is actionable on our part.
Yeah,
certainly.
I think they're
I'd like to
changes.
dig in.
But disseminate discrete issues, but only provided if it's not going to jeopardize.
I think it's really important to get all of this feedback, like amazing feedback. This is the I've only been on the commission for a handful of months now, but the number of people that have come and spoken tonight very clearly and strongly, I think it's important to be able to digest that information. If Mike is able to do that with his staff over the next week, and we can meet next Monday, then I think that we should absolutely do that.
Yeah, I agree, because having a public input session and then having a discussion of like, well, should we make time to make sure that it's in the plan? It's kind of like, well, yes, obviously, we will be making the time to make sure that that the comments in the public input session are going to be appropriately considered by us and put in the plan, so.
I guess I've just been under the impression that was the plan all along, was that we do it.
Yeah.
That we had one. That was my impression.
Yeah, I just what the drop there.
Well,
I know that.
well, I think it sort of depends on how long city council.
That's what I'm saying, I just
Yeah.
wanna have a realistic sense of where we have to hand off to them and feel okay.
Yeah, well, I think we should meet next Monday if it sounds like commissioners want to do that. And I just encourage everyone to look at the plan, and if there's, because I think part of my memory of what took so long with the plan is just wrestling with language. And so if we can all as commissioners take a look in light of these comments and kind of come up with our ideas of what we think the language should be. And
Sounds like aspirational housing and then addressing something about zoning, which, you know, we intend to do anyway, but to maybe put a little more teeth into that.
yeah, no, those are the areas of focus. I just like us to think about specifics. It's easier sometimes to react. We have these general ideas, but we need to come up with specific language. That's my point. Yes. That's right. But yeah, I would be willing to meet next Monday.
So we still have the motion on the table to approve the all
Oh.
the technical changes,
Okay.
the non-policy
I
changes.
thought we approved that.
No.
No. I just wanted.
did. That's the 31st. Okay, so. Can we just all say aye again, or do we need to restate the motion?
I don't think we ever voted.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. And do we need to do some motion to close the public hearing officially, or?
It would probably, that probably would be the proper process.
Okay.
Have a motion to close the hearing.
Okay. Anyone would like to make that motion?
I move to close the public.
I'll second.
In favor?
Aye.
Oh, general business. Oh, yes. Did anyone have?
If you came in today and said something about zoning specifically, and you have some concrete issue that you want to bring to us, you know, please send us.
Yeah. And yes, I was also remiss that we do have a general business. If somebody has comments on something not related to the public hearing, bring them forward now.
I'll make one.
Okay.
I forgot to open in. You've heard about density, you've heard about relaxing this and doing away with these. At the same time, you heard about this Act 250 exemption that extends a half mile, temporary Act 250 exemption that extends a half mile. That could be a recipe for disaster, especially if Act 250 is not in play and we aren't diligent about requiring traffic studies. You could have this much construction traffic going on with this much childcare traffic going on with a bunch of unanticipated collateral damage. So Act 250 was put in it for a purpose. It's done a good job at making thoughtful, diligent, thorough analysis. And we attempt this process and city staff especially attempt to cut corners dramatically. And I'm just warning you that cutting that corner could have massive detrimental consequences. So
What I'm hearing is the disaster being increased traffic.
increased traffic, increased accidents, increased response time for emergency vehicles, all kinds of crap could go wrong.
Right, which goes along with growing cities. Yep. Correct, no,
Yeah, whatever.
sorry,
Said whatever.
thank you for your comment.
Okay. There's no other general business comments. Thanks again, everyone.
Yes.
Yes, that was my next item.
Sorry,
Jump the gun, Aaron. Who would like, you would like to make a motion? Oh, actually, I did have a change in the. It says for the municipal planning grant that a vote was not taken, but I think we did take a vote. Yeah. And we, yeah, for an application.
Yes, we did
Yeah.
vote on that.
So I don't,
I can look at I don't have my notes with me, so I'd have to get the notes for who made the motion, so maybe let's table the minutes
Okay.
until next time.
sounds good.
I also know there was an amendment, we'll have to have Carolyn really had, just said Carolyn, it would be Carolyn.
Yeah.
I was the one that originally mentioned for the beautiful plan.
Oh, okay.
That's all I remember.
Well, let's table the minutes until next meeting. And I guess we'll just meet at City Hall next Monday.
Yeah, it'll be a regular location.
Okay. Right, and then if anyone would like to move to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn. I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, great. I'm sure you guys.
Well, I'll check the ones. Okay.
Well, I think
I'll find you out there.
It's possible, I went through the notes like, oh, don't forget, here's your agenda.
I guess you need to be on record.
Oh,
Yeah.